Blah. I went back and I listened to Project 1950. I listened to The Day the Earth Caught Fire. I listened to the single Land of the Dead. I listened to The Devil's Rain. I listened to, what was the next one? Vampire Girl, I think it is. There's Vampire Girl. I listened to, Descending Angel. That there was a single of that. I listened to the Christmas record. I don't remember what that's called, but the Christmas record. And I listened to the Friday the 13th EP. So I've listened to all of Jerry Only's output since Misfits 95. And the reason why I did that very specifically is because I really needed it in order to add context to what I was listening to with Anti-Hero. And what's interesting is, so a lot of interesting observations here, some of which you might find, at least, and mind you, these are my observations, and some of them you might find to be shocking. So in order to talk about Anti-Hero, we have to, how did we get to Anti-Hero, right? How did we get there? We got to go back a little bit. We're going to go back. We're not going to go back to 1983. I am paraphrasing the history that we're about to repeat, and I may be off a little bit. It's just the way it is. You know, I do all this stuff off the top, the dome, although I did write notes today. I did write notes like prompts and stuff so I could, try and stay focused and stay on track. We're going to get into semantics. We're going to measure ass crack hairs. We are getting down to the minutia of the minutia, because that's what we do best here on this channel. Okay. So with all that said now, let's go back and figure out how we got here in the first place. Glenn and Jerry have a lawsuit over the Misfits name. Jerry wins the right to use the Misfits moniker. They become the Misfits 95 or the Resurrected Misfits, whatever. There's a huge contingent of fans. I mean, this is like the number one divisive thing, right? That who prefers, the only Misfits is the original Misfits. No, it's a continuation, blah, 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 that whole tired bullshit of an argument. So the Misfits 95 do their thing, and the Misfits 95, I wouldn't sit there and semantically split hairs and go, is this Jerry Only solo? Of course not. This is a band. This is a fully functioning band that has multiple creative inputs. Even if Jerry is calling the shots, even if Jerry is steering the ship, you have multiple creative inputs coming into that band. You have people from out, you have Rocky on some level in the background. You have John Cafiero, and really Tank could speak better to this than me. Maybe I'm wrong here. I'll have to ask him when we're doing Grim Tales 3 later in this month for anybody who likes the Jonathan Grimm series. But you have John Cafiero, who's like the manager and stuff, and he's like directing the music videos. He's probably got some sort of input in some way, shape, or form. You got everybody in the band. And then who's the third person? I said there was going to be one more. It was Rocky. It was John Cafiero. I don't know. But the person who's steering that ship is Jerry. Jerry's like, let's go do wrestling. They're all doing wrestling. You know what I'm saying? Like Jerry sort of just steering that ship. And then the band implodes for a variety of reasons that I am so not able to go into right now. It's just too much to discuss, too much of a sidebar that implodes. And Jerry, from that moment on, even though Jerry is using the name The Misfits, it really is, they really do become the Jerry Fits. The best moniker is Jerry Fits. That's the way I think of it. Yes, they are still a band, but they're not. I mean, they record a little bit, but it really just becomes, the band is just a means for Jerry to just keep doing what he's doing. Because, and I hope this word, I'm not saying this in a negative way. I'm saying this is just calling a spade in that Jerry's a stubborn guy. Like, you know, he's driven. He works incredibly hard. He puts 150% into whatever he is doing. But from studying his career, it's like when he makes his mind up about something, it's very hard to dissuade it. It seems from an outside perspective, reading all that I read and hearing all that I hear and speaking to people that I've spoken to, you know, I may not personally know Jerry, but I've spoken to a lot of people that have interacted with him, and that's the vibe that I get. Okay, so that's where I'm speaking from, not that I actually know. And that the band essentially functions as sort of a sidecar for Jerry. That's what they become. And Jerry does something. He takes over vocal duties permanently. Now, in the past, we've read interviews with Jerry where he vents his frustration of dealing with lead singers. Jerry and Michale Graves clashed greatly. It started in the mid 90s. It got really bad when Michale Graves, this is contested. Michale Graves was like, "Hey, I'm going to go do sports camp. I'm going to go do hockey camp." And they were like, "We have a tour book," that whole thing. And they got Mike Hideous instead, who we've had. He's been on the channel and he told his whole story, that sort of thing. But Jerry has always struggled with lead singers, really. And I mean, even him and Glenn must have clashed heads at the end of the Misfits on some level, at least at the very, very end, because they broke up, right? And we know the story. We know some of that story already. We've talked about it. We've heard Jerry talk about it. We've heard Jerry do his tell-all thing in 93, right? So there's that part. There's that part too. So Jerry's struggling and he's dealing with trying to keep the band together, with trying to keep lead singers, functioning. He got that guy Zoli from Ignite. He tried to get him to sing. They tried to make, they brought Mike Hideous in for a while. They had Graves. And eventually Jerry got to a place where he's like, fuck it, I'm going to sing. And I don't think it was, a lot of people like to burn Jerry and say, "Oh, you singing because, it's an ego thing." And maybe it became that way a little bit later. Maybe, he really wanted to be a singer later on. But I get the feeling, like I said, it's just a hunch. It's not, I don't know this for certain, but I get the feeling that it started, it blossomed out of a necessity initially. Jerry started singing because he's like, this is easier to deal with than dealing with a lead singer who might be a diva or whatever the case may be, or dealing with Graves. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, this is better. I don't have, that's one less person to pay, right? That's one less, voice. That's one less passport I have to deal with. Like, so many reasons why it made sense for Jerry where he was at that time, wanting to continue on as the Misfits or continue on in music using the Misfits moniker. It's better that I just sing. That's it. That makes things easier. He has Dez in the band, but Dez is just doing Black Flag songs when they do a short micro Black Flag set, which I saw. It was great. I had fun, for what it was. But at this point, I really feel like Jerry only became a solo entity. That's what happened. And the first real true, after going back and listening back, the first real solo effort, even though he was, still operating within the band, it's kind of like Black Sabbath, right? Like Tony Iommi eventually was the final member of Black Sabbath, and he wanted to release a record as just Tony Iommi in the mid 80s. And they made him do like Tony Iommi featuring Black Sabbath or something because they wanted the name. Because why? Why use the name? Why use the name if if the nucleus is no longer there? There's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of really important business reasons. There's branding reasons. I mean, did Jerry did a lot for the Misfits for as much brand confusion as what eventually developed by having, a different band singing different albums from the original 77 to 83 Misfits. Jerry also brought value to the band in the 90s. He introduced the Misfits to a whole new generation of kids and those songs. You know what I'm saying? But Jerry's first solo effort, really, I think, is The Day the Earth Caught Fire. That's when Jerry takes over. That's when Jerry is really doing Jerry's thing. And I think it came from stubbornness. Jerry wanted to continue, soldier on, make music, and do his thing. And he didn't give a shit what anybody thought. He really didn't. Because I got to tell you, Jerry took a lot of shit from the internet in the aughts, especially in the message forums. Some of you were there and witnessed what I'm talking about, probably even contributed to it as well, where Jerry only was he was villainized. He was completely and utterly villainized, where people were just like, how dare he use the Misfits name, the Misfits, and here's the truth. Here's where I stand on all this. The Misfits to me is always Jerry and Glenn. Glenn and Jerry, Jerry and Glenn. That is the nucleus. They were there at the beginning. They were there for every single lineup. They are the cohesive element that makes the Misfits, in my opinion. You can't have one without the other and call it the Misfits. You need Jerry for it to be the Misfits, and you need Glenn for it to be the Misfits. And we saw that so well, so clearly, A, when Jerry was doing his thing, and B, even with Danzig and Doyle. We all, our faces melted. We said, this is the closest thing that we are ever going to get to a Misfits reunion. How awesome is this? And we loved it. I loved it, but it wasn't the Misfits. It wasn't. And that became so blatantly, painfully clear to me when I finally saw the original Misfits in 2016 at Riot Fest Chicago. That was when I was like, oh, this is what I was missing. Because I didn't, what Jerry adds to that stage when the three of them are together, it's magical. It's friggin' magical. And it's something that no matter how much Glenn will deny it, Glenn needed Jerry. Jerry needed Glenn, but Glenn needed Jerry too. And that's why the two of them are the Misfits. Throw Doyle in there, obviously, too, but it's Glenn and Jerry, man. It's Glenn and Jerry. So now we've cleared that up now, right? We're putting that to bed. That is what makes the Misfits the Misfits. So that informs everything that I'm going to say now and have said up until this point, talking about Jerry doing the band without Glenn, that sort of thing. You know what I'm saying? So Jerry, continues on, and he puts out just a ton of EPs. Some of them, and he finally puts out a feature length. I remember from 2000 to 2011, which now feels like it was 3 decades between a release, when in reality, it's like, it's like a blink of an eye now. But like at the time, it was like, we were all like, when is Jerry going to put out some original material? And that was the big hate on Jerry, was he doesn't put anything out. He doesn't put anything out that's original. Meanwhile, if you actually look at Jerry's release, let's see here, Day the Earth Caught Fire, Project 1950, even though it's a covers record. He did that single. He did the Devil's Rain album. He did the Vampire Girl. He did another cover and an old song. I don't know, but it's a release. It's 5, 6, 7, 8. He's put out 8 releases, 9 if you include Antihero. Now I know Graves has put out a lot of stuff since that band broke up, and Doyle he's put out 2 albums, and the Gorgeous Frankenstein. He put out 3 things in 22 years. He put out 3 things in 22 years. Chud, Chud put out one LP. Chud put out one LP and one 7-inch in almost 20 years. So Jerry's actually released quite a bit of content, good or bad. He's put out a bunch of stuff. But at the time, we were all like, what? Why is this taking so long? Jerry, God damn it, he's using the Misfits name. It's not cool. It's not cool. You know what I'm saying? Like, everybody was just so irate and and Jerry didn't give a shit. He did not care. He might have cared, but he just soldiered on. He soldiered on. He's like, this is what I want to do. And that's what I mean by the stubbornness. But I don't think it was just stubbornness. I also think, and again, these are just my thoughts. These are just like, this is just my own personal thoughts. I also think that Jerry soldiered on despite whatever backlash that he was getting, because the other thing about Jerry Only is that Jerry Only is so good to his fans. And we've talked about this. We hear endless stories of Jerry's generosity and kindness. Jerry's been in his own microcosm. My audiences love me. I love my audiences. Who cares what this stupid internet thinks? I'm just going to go about my business. And then he does eventually release an album. A big observation, Jerry releases 50 minutes of music on The Devil's Reign, right? And I don't know how well it does or if it sells really well. At this point, Jerry's had a lot of bad luck with record labels. You know, he had bad experiences with Geffen. He had bad experiences with Roadrunner. And before that, I believe he had dealings with Atlantic, going back to the Christ the Conqueror stuff. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. And so he's finally like, I'm just going to do my own. I'll do my own record label. That's what I'm going to do. And him and Cafiero, they formed Misfits Records. And so they put out Devil's Reign. I don't know how well it did, but they had to have made, I'd imagine they did better than they would have if they were on a major label, right? That's what I mean to say. They would have done better than if they were on a major label, because, there's less, I don't know, probably less middlemen to deal with, taking slices of the pie, that sort of thing. And then right after they released 50 minutes of music, 16 tracks, they just start putting out a slew of singles. There's no follow-up. He started to realize it's better to release my music in small little increments and small little chunks than it is to give away a whole album. And he started putting out these releases. And I got to tell you, those releases, from what I understand, those releases all sold incredibly well over the last, whatever, how many years. He understood the value of packaging, and he understood what his fan market wanted, which was collectible, multicolored vinyl, which is something that connected to the old Misfits. Jerry tapped into that, and I think that it has served him really well. And what's funny is I think even Glenn caught on to that, because Glenn started to do that a little bit as well. And he did it a lot with the Danzig Sings Elvis album. And I wonder if he sort of got wind of that from watching maybe what Jerry was doing. Even though, I mean, Glenn was doing that all the way back to the Misfits days. But it's like, I feel like for years, Glenn didn't do variants. And not until he was with Cleopatra did that really start. Maybe that was a Cleopatra decision. I don't know. Because if you look at Glenn's track record after the Misfits and Sam Hain, there really wasn't much thought into like, hey, let's have all these, limited pressings and blah, blah, blah. By that point, they were on a major label. So it was like, or they were on a, Deaf American. Probably didn't think about that stuff anymore without Plan 9. I mean, Jerry did a lot of touring as the Jerry Fits. Those guys would go out and they would play show after show. They went all over the world playing shows, right? They worked hard. One thing you got to say about Jerry is that dude goes hard in anything that he does. He pours himself into it. And there was a shift. Dez left, and that made way for Jerry Other, which is a moniker that I have always thought was really great. I always got a kick out of the fact that you have Jerry Only and his son Jerry Other. I thought that was tremendous. That Friday the 13th EP came out after they had announced that the original Misfits were coming back. And you know that Jerry was like, we got to get this out. We got to get this out before, because the gate was probably coming down. And they wanted to get it out. They got that thing. They shot that thing out. I checked. They released music in 2013. It wasn't a lot of music. It was just a release. They did a release in 2013, 2014, 2015, and 2016, which is, doing a release a year is, especially when you're an independent label, that's, that's good. That's not bad. Oh yeah, that's right. Thank you, Steve. You're right. They did the song on the Dr. Demento album. You are right. That was another release, and I didn't listen to that before we came on here. Damn it. That's right. That is correct. A lot of the contention and a lot of the sort of back and forth here is some people going, Jerry shouldn't be singing. Jerry's not a singer. Jerry shouldn't be singing, blah, blah, blah. This isn't up for debate because the reality is Jerry sings. That's it. He's a singer. If you do the thing, then you are the thing. And that goes back to my point about Jerry sort of being like stubborn and sort of like, like persevering on despite any criticism he may receive or, people perceiving what he's doing as disrespectful to the legacy that he helped to build. And the reality is it's like Jerry's singing. Maybe it's for nobody but Jerry himself. And I don't mean that in a self-absorbed ego way. I mean that in like Jerry doing that because he needs to prove to himself that he can sing. That's why, and you'll notice, and I'm going to get into it. I keep saying that I'm going to get into it. I have very specific observations about Jerry's vocals from the day the Earth caught fire all the way up to Antihero that I just noticed like this sort of pattern or not pattern. I've noticed like the evolution of his vocals and why I think the way that I think because of that. But the one thing we have to stop discussing as fans, if we're talking about Antihero or we're talking about Jerry's artistic output, is this idea that he's not a singer, because he is a singer. He sings all the fucking time. For good or for bad, the dude has been singing for 25 years. And really, he's been singing since the Misfits. Because Jerry, when I say the Misfits, I mean the 77 to 83 Misfits, because Jerry used to do backing vocals. Jerry's been doing backing vocals for 40 fucking years. And frankly, that's really, truly where he shines. And I think that's part of the problem. Here's another aspect of the issue with people have, I think, with Jerry singing and this, that, and the other. And it's this. This is all right. So this analogy really applies to school. And it's going to make sense when we talk about it later in terms of Jerry's strengths versus Jerry's weaknesses as a singer. But it's this idea that if you tell a fish to climb a tree, he's going to feel really, and he can't. I messed up the analogy already. Let's say that you have a bunch of different animals and like standing on one side, you have 3 monkeys and you pair those 3 monkeys with a fish and you tell the 3 monkeys and the fish, go climb that tree. And all the monkeys climb up the tree effortlessly, but the fish can't. The fish is going to feel stupid its whole life because it can't climb the tree. When in reality, it should be in the water swimming. And I think that's my analogy for Jerry and his backup vocals. Jerry is a phenomenal backup vocalist. And it's so friggin' what's the word I'm looking for? Prevalent. It's so obvious when you see the original Misfits. Glenn doesn't miss a beat. with these songs. It's still his vocal range, whatever is going on with his vocal cords, he can still sing those Misfit songs just fucking perfectly, especially in the year 2016. But what really fills out everything, what really thickens everything, what thickens the sauce, you know how you put you put flour into the sauce to thicken it up, is Jerry backing him up, man, with the go, or the, you know, just Jerry knows how to he knows how to lock in his voice to Glenn's voice when they're doing, you know, when they're singing live, and it's great. And those are Jerry's strengths. But Jerry doesn't play into his strengths. Jerry just wants to sing. He just wants to be on Front Street. I am singing. I am a singer, blah, blah, blah. And the way that he goes about it does not service him as an artist or his songs. And that's my honest opinion. I could sit here and lie and say, you know, be a Jerry only fanboy, but that's the truth. That's the truth. I love Jerry. I love what he does. I'm happy and grateful for what he does. But I think that he doesn't play into those strengths when he tries to execute his own singing. He's singing in registers that you can hear him on the record sort of really pushing. I mean, he's working so hard. You can hear how hard he's working, trying to do something that his voice physically doesn't seem to be able to do. As I said, I went back and I listened to all of Jerry's output. I did. I wanted to really sort of get a grasp. And here's what I learned. When you listen to The Day the Earth Caught Fire, Jerry's voice is raw, it's rugged, and there's a truth to his voice when he's singing that song. There's no studio polish, there's no tricks. It's just Jerry growling. It's like, hey, I'm jumping in with 2 feet and I'm going to try and sing this. I'm just going to try and sing this and go for it. And you want to know something? It actually works. Now, if you had asked me, hey, Jeff, does this work? You know, if you ask Jeff in the year 2004, what do you think of that? I'd be like, oh, no, it doesn't work at all. Oh my God, I don't like. But having, you know, now having gone back and having distance and time and looking at everything in a big picture and having a better understanding and really following these people on their careers, I look back and I go, that actually, for him, for Jerry and what Jerry's trying to accomplish, that stubborn, like, I have to do this. I want to be a singer. I want to forge on and do this thing. That actually works for him. However, it's still a little rough. It's a little bit rough. Then I listened to Project 1950. And Project 1950, we could do a whole podcast on. Project 1950 was one of the most hated, reviled things that Jerry had ever done, at least in the eyes of certain fans. Certain fans absolutely detested Project 1950. And the only thing that I can find wrong, even back then and even now, the only thing I could find wrong with Project 1950 is that it says the Misfits on it and not Jerry only, right? It should say Jerry only or the Jerry Fits or only Jerry. You know what I'm saying? What is really great about, or what really works for Jerry on Project 1950 is the way that he's singing. So now Jerry, I don't know where he recorded the Day the Earth Caught Fire or whatever, but I feel like they went into a proper studio and recorded Project 1950 in a proper kind of way. And Jerry's vocals are mixed perfectly on this because, again, for a guy who is not a lead singer naturally, he is singing in the register that suits his voice best and suits the arrangements of the songs that he's trying to put out best. It's all mixed. His voice is balanced in the mix. It's not sitting on top. And that is probably, it's one of the single biggest problems. And it doesn't work for Antihero. That's part of the problem. It just doesn't, having his vocals so far up. Jerry's vocals on Project 1950 are excellent for Jerry and what Jerry is trying to do. He needs dirtier vocals, and the vocals on Project 1950 are really dirty. I mean, they're really sort of like scruffy, and it really suits his voice really well. What he's doing here on Antihero, it doesn't work for his voice. It doesn't suit his voice. And that's what I'm really trying to say. That's what I'm actually trying to say. That's the truth. And you know what's funny? There were 3 extra tracks on Project 1950, and you can tell they were recorded later. You can tell that maybe they were even recorded with Ed Stasium or whoever. They were not done in the environment with the approach that the original 10-track album was. They are more polished. Go listen to it on Spotify right now. Go listen to the last 3 songs on Project 1950 and compare them to the vocals on the rest of Project 1950, and you will see an inane difference. And that's when Jerry really started to try and polish his vocals, and it does not suit him. He is better with filters and fuzz boxes and dirtying it up and burying it in the mix. It just suits the songs better. It does. It suits the songs better. It makes his vocals sound better, and it suits the songs better.